it could also be because of the incidents that happened to my church and my school in San Francisco, where the church was firebombed in a hate crime in 2020. It could be because of the incident at the airport where I was racially profiled, and as many of you read it in the New York Times, something that impacted many of us as Armenian-Americans. And I know that all the people in the committee feel very strongly about this as well, right? And in that work that we do in championing our rights, combating Armenophobia, we came across something that we all knew about that really hurt our feelings, but more than that, hurt our pocketbook as a community. And that's the incident involving Citibank. As we know, financial institutions have been ruthless with us, and we know this because not only is it something that impacts banking, but it also impacts being able to have a piece of the American dream, a home. We know that Armenians were forbidden from buying homes in Fresno and other parts of California, and up until recently, it felt as though we were on our own. It felt as though Armenians had nowhere to turn. It felt as though, even though all of us are so proud to be American, that there wasn't anyone there to stand up on behalf of this community. And that actually, in my opinion, really shifted in November of 2023, when we all got word of the Citigroup incident. Today we have a great guest for us, someone that I respect dearly, and I know many of you do as well. That guest is Director Rohit Chopra. The director is really the person in charge of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And many of us remember the turmoil that existed in 2008 and 2009 with the banking industry collapsing. And in the wake of that, there was an effort made to really reshape the banking industry. And that's when this bureau was formed. And in 2011 till now, this bureau is really in charge of ensuring that banking is done in the right way, in a transparent way, in a way that does not discriminate against communities like ours. And the person at the helm of that is Rohit Chopra. Now, before being the director of the organization there, he actually was a commissioner for the Federal Trade Commission, and he was very much adamant about ensuring consequences for repeat offenders, and to ensure that the Made in USA logo and Made in USA feel that we all share as Americans was protected. He has gone to Harvard, I believe, and Wharton Business School as well. So, of course, we all recognize those are very elite schools, and he is a very accomplished person. So without further ado, the director, Rohit Chopra.
Well, thank you, Alec. I really appreciate you setting the stage for that. And let me just share, I think you all probably who live in Glendale and the surrounding areas probably remember 15, 20 years ago, much of Southern California was being engulfed by very aggressive predatory mortgage lending. And at the end of that, really in 2007, 2008, we really saw how problems in the mortgage market created massive chaos in the global financial markets, and ultimately the greatest financial crisis and deepest financial crisis since the Great Depression. So I think at that time, a lot of people took stock and said, really what Alex was mentioning, what is going on? Why are we allowing systemic abuses to go on? And what are we going to do to fix it? So Congress enacted legislation, the Dodd-Frank Act, and it established a new agency that was solely focused on protecting consumers, their personal data, and guarding against discrimination. So it's a relatively new agency. We're responsible for oversight of banks and also these non-bank lenders, credit reporting companies, debt collectors, the list goes on and on. And it also was formed in the backdrop of massive bailouts for some of the largest financial institutions who were able to really get back on their feet because of taxpayers. So I wanted to just give you a couple of details about our investigation and what we found at Citigroup. So you may know, Citigroup is one of the largest financial institutions in the world. It operates banking activities all over the place and has major presence in deposit accounts, credit cards, and more. Now, under the law, there is a long-standing prohibition on discriminating against people based on their sex, their national origin, their race, and more. The CFPB really looked at all of the banks in the market. We take whistleblowers, we take consumer complaints, and we found one of the worst abuses when it came to discrimination almost in our history. Let me share a little bit more with you. So when you apply for a credit card, you often submit certain information about your income, your name, your address, other things like that. Now, federal law requires that the application is evaluated fairly and that you are given a response if you get that application approved or the reasons why you were denied. So here's what happened when it came to Citibank's credit card unit. Now, you may know that banks issue lots and lots of different types of credit cards. And Citibank specifically has a big business related to retail store credit cards. You're probably familiar with this. You might go into a department store, retail store, something like that. They might have a special offer for you to sign up for a credit card that might give you, discounts, points, bonuses, and Citigroup had a pretty big one. So what we found is that there was an intentional attempt to, and essentially purposely discriminate against applicants of Armenian descent, primarily based on the spelling of their last name. So what we found was that Citi had essentially a policy that treated Armenian-Americans and suspected them as those who are likely to commit fraud. So from at least, we think, 2015 through 2021, Citi targeted retail services credit card applicants with surnames that Citi employees associated with Armenian origin, and specifically targeted surnames that ended in IAN or YAN. And as many of you know, that is strongly associated with Americans of Armenian descent. And in addition, Citi also discriminated against people from Glendale, California, which you know very well, which is home to approximately 15% of the Armenian-American population in the US. Now, I mentioned earlier that they were required to give a specific notice explaining why the applicant was denied. And what we found was that those notices were essentially fabricated. So often, the application had all of the markers for approval, and Citi employees had to concoct reasons why they were denying these applications because they simply knew they couldn't put because we think they're Armenian. Now, I think that this speaks to a larger issue about not just discrimination, but the use of technology, data, and more. So in some ways, this is old school discrimination. Alex referenced some of this, discrimination of the past and the present. But one of the things that we're thinking about at the CFPB is really the future of lending and uses of data. And of course, that means thinking about artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence sometimes is just a marketing term, but it's really about the use of complex data formulations and algorithms in order to make decisions and determinations. Now here, we found actual damning evidence of where city employees were discriminating against those of Armenian descent and those living in Glendale. But with artificial intelligence, what those algorithms do is they are constantly taking in new types of data, new ways to create associations and predictions. And this is happening all over our life. And one of the things I'm really worried about is that the future might make it even more difficult to detect sophisticated technological patterns of discrimination. And I think many people once thought, well, if we put it all to the machines, we can take away the human bias. But here's the problem. A lot of the data and a lot of the decisions that are made reflect human bias today. So Citigroup's algorithm may actually have incorporated human bias if this is someday in the digital future. So we are looking at all sorts of ways, not only to stop the human bias of the past, but really the digital redlining of the future. Now, of course, we have taken action, a substantial enforcement action. Citigroup will pay $26 million. They will redress victims. They will fix their systems. But I'm going to tell you that Citigroup has actually scored very, very high under a law called the Community Reinvestment Act. Community Reinvestment Act is a law from about 50 years ago that is essentially set out to make sure that discrimination doesn't occur. In other words, it's not just forbidding discrimination, it ensures affirmative fair lending to make sure that banks located in communities are fairly serving those people. Now, it's not clear to me how Citigroup would able to obtain such a high score. It's one of the reasons why the bank regulators, the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, and others have updated the rules to make sure that there is not great inflation for some of these very large banks. And when they're caught engaging in severe wrongdoing, they really should be penalized for it. So, Alex, I really think that this incident, which I think we're incident is a euphemism, this serious illegal scheme, I think harmed many people in your community deeply, but I think it really should be a lesson for us about how are we making sure that banks and financial institutions who get a lot of public support in the form of Federal Reserve assistance, discount window lending, all sorts of things, how are we making sure that they are chartered to serve their neighborhoods and communities fairly? And in addition, what are we going to do, all of us, to make sure that the algorithms and artificial intelligence of the future don't reinforce these biases? So I don't want to go on and on, Alex. I'll pause so that we can take any questions, but I'm really grateful for all of you who have really took notice of this and want to make sure that it doesn't happen ever again in the future.
You know, Rohit, thank you so much for your leadership. It really speaks volumes. Our community is very much indebted to you in what you have done. And it's not just us, it's actually all of us as Americans that benefit from this, as you said. I do have some questions for you. And the first one is more personal in nature. You know, often we find ourselves kind of in this place where we're always championing everyone else's rights as Armenians. We're always there at the forefront to help others. And very infrequently are there people who care about us as Armenian-Americans. And it seems that you are just so personally invested in doing the right thing. What makes you so passionate in doing this work?
Well, it's really funny. I think so many of us have our own personal stories about our parents or grandparents, what they faced. And I think so many of us know that we really think of their coming to America as such a jackpot for us, being able to live in a place with so much opportunity. But I think with that, Alex, comes a responsibility that we have to be realistic about where that opportunity is being foreclosed. And I really think that the foreclosure crisis that we saw in the US, which was followed by, in many ways, an opioid crisis, a student debt crisis, there were many, many people profiting off of this. And we need to make sure, and you as attorneys and officers of the court really have to embrace the concept of equal justice. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm going to be candid with you. I think a lot of lawyers have really lost that sense of seeing themselves as stewards of opportunity and justice. And I just think that is so critical for your profession. And really, so many of us, even though it doesn't affect directly me, this action, I have a name that people can pretty much guess, my ethnicity. So does so many other people in our country. And I think this is a lousy history that we have to make sure is put to a stop. I also think that if we allow financial institutions with lots of power to kind of run across the law as if it's a suggestion, that really undermines trust in the entire financial system. It makes people more suspicious, when in reality, there are so many ways people can be better off by being part and included in the banking system. I have seen so many times where people, we see this in surveys, of children who grew up in a home that was foreclosed upon, or some other financial catastrophe, and in some ways it permanently scars them, makes them distrustful. And I don't think we can have an America that is working unless we really make sure that everyone is following the law and treating people fairly.
Rohit, that gives me a lot of optimism and hope as an American, and you're also a member of our community now, whether you like it or not. So if you ever come to Los Angeles, you better make sure to come visit us. I recognize that there are a lot of things that may be challenging to discuss when there is an ongoing investigation or when there was an investigation. But are there any details that you can shed light on as far as how this came about and what, if anything, occurred as far as how you were able to take it to the place that you took it to?
Well, so we have lots of ways in which we uncover these types of crimes. I want to share with you something really cool that the CFPB does. If you go to consumerfinance.gov, you can file a complaint. Any individual can file a complaint about a financial product or service. And what's really interesting, how most places when you file some sort of complaint, it kind of goes in some sort of mailbox or a black hole. That's not how we do it. What we do is we actually require the financial institution to respond to you. And on top of that, we put all of the complaints in a public database. We redacted personal information. So we have people all over the country looking at this database and pointing to things and looking at trends. And our data scientists crunch a lot of numbers. And sometimes we're able to find just a handful of complaints that turns out to be a nationwide scam. So I always want to make sure we encourage everyone who even suspects something is going wrong to file something with us. In some cases, the financial institution will just immediately give a refund or fix the issue. But often we can solve systemic issues across the country. We also make sure that we're not just passive and waiting for things. We're actively going to all the financial institutions and asking them, what are they doing to make sure that they are compliant with all the existing laws and regulations, especially when it comes to fair lending. So I will share with you some of the details of this case were unfortunately a little bit upsetting. We uncovered a whole set of evidence that include employee communications. Alex, I know that some of it is going to be offensive to the room, but in the complaint, it refers to our members of the Armenian community with certain types of phrases, names that suggested they were clearly being discriminated against. We didn't put all of those sort of dirty details in there, but I'll just share that when I reviewed it personally, it was clear that this was a really, really big problem. And specifically, city employees were saying that Armenians were more likely to bust out. This was their term to say that they would apply for a credit card, charge a lot of money, and then leave the country or just default on it. Now, the reality is we don't allow in our laws to allow banks and others to just stereotype people. We require them to use factors that are objective, like income, like credit score, other things. And of course, like I mentioned before, many times the applicant met all of the criteria, but the employees wanted to figure out a way to shut down the application, and it meant sometimes fabricating information. I'll share with you, there was another thing that really caught my eye in this. Citibank actually, in some ways, was sanctioning employees if they failed to identify and deny those applicants from Glendale or those with Armenian-sounding names. We've put in our findings in our order that the employees who failed to do so, it could affect their performance rating, their pay, or their ability to approve applications. We found that supervisors and trainers there instructed employees to conceal their reliance on Armenian-sounding names. And we looked at statistical analysis and other things to really put together this case. So at the end of the day, Alex, it was upsetting to everyone. I'm sure upsetting to those in the room, but I'm really glad we were able to detect this. But of course, I'm not kidding myself. I'm sure there are many other places where this is happening.
Rohit, it's definitely upsetting, but it's not surprising at all. Many of us in this room have experienced discrimination and have seen discrimination impacting our community quite regularly. And unfortunately, the truth of it is we don't get the same response when that happens. And what you've done really exemplifies equal justice, really standing up for, quite frankly, perhaps one of the most egregious examples of discrimination when it comes to banking institutions. We serve as a conduit to our community, not just in LA, but around the country, and even in Canada as well. I see someone here from Canada who made sure to emphasize that. But the thing is that for us, when we saw what you did, we immediately put together a public service announcement and a public education campaign to help inform our community and to provide essentially a vehicle for them to perhaps explore legal remedies or to better understand what it is that your department did. And you may not be surprised by this, but we received well over 30 responses, and a wide range of them did end up resulting in various lawsuits. There is a class action, I believe, underway. But some other allegations came to light as well involving other financial institutions. What, if anything, can you tell us about perhaps things that may involve other financial institutions as it relates to Armenian-Americans?
So we don't have any filed lawsuits or administrative actions related to this specific discrimination. But that being said, I've had the chance to meet some people after this was announced who told me they were personally had their bank account shut off or an application denied. In addition to making sure they're filing complaints with us, I hope, Alex, they can continue to come to you all, and that you'll, now that I wanted to do this because I wanted to make sure that you all had a relationship with us and that you could bring to our attention where you think it may be happening with mortgage companies, other small business loans, other credit card companies, banking institutions, whatever it may be. I also want to share with you, I'm worried for Armenian-Americans with common surnames, how this might be affecting people's credit reports as well. You know, if there is issues of mistaken identity or discrimination in a credit reporting situation, that can also create havoc for someone's personal financial life. So I hope, Alex, it works with you that in addition to sending people to file with us directly, that you can also periodically meet with us to tell us what you're hearing so we can take action and to make clear to the entire industry this is not going to be tolerated.
You know, Rohit, most definitely, this is a long journey that we'll be on together because it is very important, not only for our community, but for the rest of the country when we talk about economic discrimination. And I do think that it's a great shining example of what can be achieved when we work together. You know, Rohit, one more question. What, if anything, can we do as far as additional resources that you can shed light on, as far as when these incidents occur, where we can help essentially guide people to secondary or tertiary support?
It's a great question. So we'll make sure we come back to you with some other additional information about, one, how people can determine if they might have been, a victim of this. So just to give you a little bit of clear detail, we think it's at least 2015 and happened certainly until about 2021. It stopped after I believe it stopped after we started investigating it. And it covered the retail services credit cards. So that means we didn't find that it was happening in, let's say, the general Citibank credit cards that was occurring in, the normal ones that you apply for. It was only in the ones we found, at least to our knowledge, in the retail services credit cards. So there's a number of partnerships that Citibank has with retail services credit cards. You may know that two of the very largest ones, Citi offers a credit card through Home Depot, through Best Buy. So there are a number of places that are significant retail outlets where it could have occurred. We did not find evidence that it was happening, for example, in any Citibank card that might have been related to a normal card they offer that is not branded with a retailer.
Rohit, thank you so much. We're really excited here about the journey together between your department and this organization, and we recognize how busy you are, and this is a Saturday. Thank you all. Please give them a round of applause.
Well, Alex, thank you again for having me. I know it's not always great virtual, but I really wanted the chance to be able to say directly, how important this case was, and that I hope you really share information in the community about it. And if we think it's happening somewhere else, I want to hear about it. So thank you again, and I hope you had a terrific time.